All right, good evening. My name is Catherine from SEB Housing, and this is the information session for the 65 affordable apartments at Hawkley Apartments in Milford. So the purpose of this session is to give you a little bit of background information on the available apartments, and I'll also cover the eligibility and lottery process and what to expect after the lottery. So if you have any questions during this session, you can either type them into the Zoom chat or you can unmute yourself. Everyone was muted when they came in just to minimize any outside noise. This is a live session. It's being recorded and it will be saved to SEB Housing's YouTube channel. So for anyone who's watching this after the fact, you came in through YouTube or the link on our website to find this. And if you have questions, if you're watching this after the fact, if you have questions for us, please reach out at info@sebhousing.com or at the phone number that's on the screen here too. You can reach out to us in either way. And so just for some background information on who we are, so SEB Housing, we are not the on-site affordable rental office. We are an off-site affordable housing consultant group. So we've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, and we'll also be the ones gathering the lottery applications to determine applicants' eligibility for the lottery and the affordable housing program. So in the initial phases of the process, we are your main point of contact rather than the management office, but then further on down the line, the on-site management team at Hawkley Apartments will be in touch with you. So the first step in the process is to apply for the lottery, and SEB Housing will find you either to preliminarily qualify for the affordable housing program based on your self-reported income information on your application, or you'll get a denial. So if you have questions on a denial, if you get that, please let us know. We want to make sure that you understand why you may have been denied. But if you're approved for the lottery, you will be given a lottery application number, and that is the number that will be entered into the lottery. SEB Housing will run the lottery and will generate the waiting list. The top households on each waiting list will be invited by the leasing office to complete the lease and program eligibility process and applications with the leasing office. So that's separate from that initial screening that SEB Housing will be doing to get you into the lottery. The management team's lease screenings might include, credit check, rental history check, background check, that sort of thing. And their program screening is done to confirm that your household qualifies for the affordable housing program, because remember, to get into the lottery, you're just self-reporting your income. But when you're doing the actual screening at the end of this process, you will have to submit, pay stubs, bank statements, that sort of thing. And you'll be asked to provide all of that information in your invitation from the leasing office. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to go to our website, so sebhousing.com. If you click on rental opportunities, you're going to see that there's a page specific to Hawkley Apartments, and you'll be taken to that page. There's a downloadable version of the application and the information packet. The information packet contains a lot of the information that I'm going to be talking about tonight. And there's also a link to the online application. So we encourage everyone to complete your application online. It is going to be the quickest way to apply and ensure that your application is received by us right away. Once you've submitted that online application, you'll get an instantaneous confirmation email. That does not letting you know that we've actually reviewed your application yet. It's just confirming that it's been received. So in about a week or two after that, you'll get a more personalized email from us with more information with your lottery application number if you were approved. If for any reason that online application is not an option for you and you want to fill the application out either as a PDF, as a paper form, you can do that. So you can download the version on our website. You can give us a call or email us and ask for one to be mailed to you, however is best for you. And then you could submit that to us in one of several ways. So you could email it back to us as an attachment. You could send it by regular mail. You could drop it in the Dropbox over in Needham, which is where our office is. Whichever one of those options works best for you. You're encouraged to get your application in early. It's fairly brief. Like I said, you don't need to submit supporting documentation at this point. So you're just self-reporting what your income, assets, household composition, all of that is. The application deadline is September 9th at 2 p.m. It's very specific, and the reason for that is because the online application link is not going to be accessible after 2 p.m. on the 9th. So you want to make sure you get that in before then. For this lottery, you don't need to be a resident of Milford to apply. There is going to be local preference for some of the affordable units, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, but that shouldn't discourage anyone from applying if they don't qualify for that preference. It is anticipated that the first apartments at Hawkley are going to be available for occupancy soon after the lottery and all of the required applicant screening, so there shouldn't be much of a delay moving in once your household is approved and the lottery has been run. So the apartments themselves, so there's 3 studio apartments that are going to be affordable. Those each have 1 bathroom. The rent for the studio is $1,706. There's 33 1-bedroom apartments. There's 1 bathroom, and that will rent for $1,787. There is 2 1-bedroom apartments that are both mobility and hearing impairment accessible, if anybody is looking for those features. There's 23 2-bedroom apartments that will rent for $2,122, and one of those 2 bedrooms is both mobility and hearing impairment accessible. And there's also 6 3-bedrooms. Those have 2 bathrooms, and they will rent for $2,435. So those rent amounts are a function of the program. So they're not set in accordance with an applicant's income or financial circumstances. So the rent's not going to change based on any income fluctuations you might have. So for this housing program, the rents are set using a formula that's based on the federal housing and urban development area median income for, in this case, the Eastern Worcester, Milford area. The rent could increase once per year, but never in the middle of a lease term. So if you were to sign a lease for October 1st, for example, your rent would be the same for at least the first year. So it wouldn't change until October of 2027. And there would always be advance written notice of any rent changes. So the affordable apartments were selected by the owner, and they've been approved by Mass Housing, which is the agency that oversees this program. So they are not all, in one location in the complex. They're not the smallest. They're not identifiable as being affordable from the outside in any way. So that's something I wanted to mention as well. Tenants will need to pay for electric heat, cooking, hot water, and electricity. Water and sewer charges are included in the rent, as is a parking space for each household. And there's in-unit laundry, central AC. This is a modern new build complex that has a pool, a fitness center, great amenities for anyone who is looking for that type of a setup. So a lot of logistics, kind of give you a basic overview of the units at Hawkley Apartments. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, let me know during this. And I'll jump into the eligibility requirements for the affordable housing program. So the question here, do you know what the layout will be for the 1-bedroom, 1-bath? So I believe we have the, let me double check here. I believe we have the floor plans. If we don't, then I can ask for those and get them to you. But let me just double check real quick. Because I could screen share for you if I do, but if I don't, I will get back to you on that. You could email us. Yeah, I don't have them ready right now, but I could get those to you. So if you want to email info@scbhousing.com, I will get back to you with like a larger version of the floor plan, so you'll be able to see that 1 bedroom and 1 bath. So the eligibility criteria for this property and for this lottery, I should say. There's 4 eligibility requirements that are listed in the information packet. They're listed on your screen right now. And I'll talk a lot more about the first one in just a few minutes, but just to list them off for you. So the first thing, that all households who qualify or who apply for these apartments, in order to qualify for the affordable housing program, your household has to have an income. This is a total annual household income that is at or below the maximum income limit for the affordable housing program. So that's listed on your screen right now. That's 80% of the area median income for Eastern Worcester, Milford area. So if you're a 1-person household and you make above $74,800 a year in gross income, you won't be eligible for this lottery, unfortunately. And I'll come back to how we calculate income in just a minute. The second eligibility criteria to keep in mind is that households can't own a home. So if you own a home now, it would need to be sold prior to doing your program screening with the leasing office. And then something else to keep in mind for eligibility, priority is going to be given based on household composition. So generally that means larger households are going to have priority for larger units. So if you're and also I should say for this lottery, 1-person households can't apply for 2-bedroom units, and 2-person households can't apply for 3-bedroom units unless a household member has a disability, which requires a reasonable accommodation for an extra bedroom. A lot more information is in the information packet about household size and type, but when you're filling out your application, you're going to be selecting what your household type is, and it'll give you each breakdown of kind of what your family could consist of, so you know what box to check. And then finally, this doesn't come up very often, but applicants can't have a financial interest in the development or be what the affordable housing program refers to as a related party. And what that means is if you work for the developer or work for the management team or leasing office, you may not be eligible for the lottery. And then just to circle back on the income limits. So the maximum income limits are set by household size, as you can see, size 1 all the way down to 6 people here. So when you're filling out your application or when you're looking into applying, you want to just make sure that your total household income is below this. And again, a reminder that verifying your income, so pay stubs, tax returns, all of that is not required at the time of your lottery application, but you will be, if you're qualified for this lottery, you will be sent a documentation requirements guide, which is basically a heads up and a guide on what you will need to provide after the lottery if you're one of the top households on the waiting list who's invited forward to complete the screening process. So how many pay stubs you might need, all of that sort of thing. So although we don't need verification of income right now, I still would like to give you a basic overview of how your income will be calculated. So income for this program is counted as a projection of the household income over the next 12 months. So all income for household members is included. So that includes bonuses, overtime. It's your gross income, unfortunately, not the net income after taxes and health insurance and all of that are taken out. The only exception to that is minors. So if you have a 16-year-old, for example, in your household who's working and earning a wage, we're not going to count their wage income. If you have a dependent full-time student who's working, so maybe you have a college student who's 20 and they're working and earning a wage, it's only $480 per year that we would count when determining or when using their income towards your total household income. So those are really the only 2 exceptions. Otherwise, all income is counted, including Social Security and all of that. So like I said, it is gross income that we count, although most of us are not taking home the gross income amount that's listed on our pay stub. And then how we calculate income isn't the same for everyone because everyone's circumstances are unique. So a lot of applicants are going to have a weekly or biweekly salary that's consistent throughout the year, but there are people who are self-employed, working per diem or seasonally. And in those circumstances, since the wages are a little more sporadic, we may need to look further into into the past to be able to project what your future income is. So we might need to ask for more pay stubs, statements from your employer, that sort of thing. But in general, any income that you have been making, we have to assume that you're going to continue making it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation confirming that you're no longer making that income. So for example, if we look at your tax returns and it shows you had 2 jobs last year, we're going to be looking for information about those 2 employers. And if you don't have one of those employers anymore, we would just need to verify when that income source stopped. So when you're filling out your application, just make sure you're listing everything. There is no asset limit for rental opportunities, but we do still need to request your bank statements from you and all of that. So when you're thinking about your assets and you're filling out your application, it's not just checking and savings accounts, but we need you to write down the net value of any retirement accounts like 401ks or 403bs that you have, Venmo, PayPal, all that kind of stuff, if you have any money in those accounts. And it's not because that's going to be counted as income, it's just that if you make any interest on those assets, the income that you earn as interest would be counted towards your total household income, but not the balance that you have necessarily. So on the previous slide here, you saw that there's a minimum income amount listed as well. So there is no minimum income amount for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the team at Hawkley Apartments, wants to make sure that all of their tenants, including tenants who are renting market rate units, tenants who are renting affordable units, can afford the rent. So the management company has set a minimum household income amount equivalent to 2 times the rent. So that's the amounts that you see here, 2 times the monthly rent, I should say. So households looking to rent a 1-bedroom apartment, for example, would need to have a minimum household income of approximately $42,800. And the reason I say approximately is because it's going to be the leasing office's discretion as to whether or not your household meets this minimum income requirement that they have set. So you might make $40,000 a year, but you have some cash that you're able to use that you have access to that's in your bank accounts that you'd be able to access for rent. So they may choose to approve you even if you're slightly below the minimum income amount. These maximum income amounts, though, those are set by the program. So if your household has even $1 above these amounts, unfortunately, in income, you won't qualify for the affordable housing lottery. The only exception to that, the minimum income amount, is households with mobile housing vouchers. So if you're a voucher holder, maybe you have a Section 8 voucher, an MRVP voucher, you can disregard those minimum incomes because they don't apply to you. You are going to have a voucher that's picking up a portion of your monthly rent. If you do have a voucher, though, you want to make sure that you're checking with the agency that issues your voucher to confirm that the rents for this property are within the payment standards or the maximum rents that are allowable with your voucher before you apply, just because you'd rather know sooner than later. But of course, applicants without a voucher, you need to have an income between these 2 amounts to be able to qualify for this lottery. That's really it about assets and income. As I mentioned, if you're interested in the lottery, we encourage you to get your application in to get the process started. And I also want to mention too, if you're interested in more than 1 bedroom size or apartment size, you by all means can apply for that for more than 1 on your application. There's really no downside to doing that. Excuse me. Sorry about that, I have to clear my throat. There's no downside to applying for more than 1 unit size. There is a potential downside to not doing that and then deciding later that you might be interested in more than 1 apartment size. And that's because these waiting lists could be long, and you would be at the end of the waiting list that you didn't apply for during the lottery if you decide that you are interested in that bedroom size later on. So once you submit your application, we'll contact you if anything appears to be missing or incorrect, if you need to resubmit. If you're found eligible for the lottery, you'll be sent an email with your lottery application number, and that will be in the form of a series of numbers. So that's just an anonymous identifier. It is the number that you want to keep in mind because it is going to be called during the lottery, but it's not a ranking of any sort. It just corresponds with the order in which your application was approved. So if you were the very first person to submit and be approved for this lottery, your lottery application number would be A.001, for example. That email that you get with your lottery application number once you're approved for the lottery is also going to confirm whether or not your household qualifies for local preference, because you will have self-reported that on your lottery application. And verification that your household qualifies for local preference, like a lease in Milford or something like that, will be required after the lottery. So you want to make sure that you fill that out accurately, because if you fill out, yes, I have local preference, I live in Milford, and then you don't, you will be bumped down the waiting list at that point. So local preference could apply to you if you live in Milford, if you work for the town of Milford or work at a business located within Milford, or if you are the guardian or parent of a child attending Milford Public Schools. Like I mentioned, some of the apartments at Hawkley will have local preference, which means that some local preference households will get priority for those units when compared to similarly sized households who don't have local preference. And there's a lot more about local preference on the information packet, but just to give you an idea of what the waiting lists look like, they're on page 11 of the information packet, and they're on your screen right now. So there are, the 3-bedroom units have local preference. Some of the 2-bedroom units have local preference, and 1-bedroom units have local preference. So if you're a Type 2 local preference household, you're going to have priority for the 3-bedroom units, for example. Type 3 non-local preference households will be next, and it goes from there. So as you can see, your household type has more weight than being local preference, because Type 3 households who don't have local preference on this 3-bedroom waiting list are going to have priority over Type 2 households who have local preference. So this just gives you more information about how the waiting list will be sorted after the lottery is run. It can get a little complicated to look at if you're not familiar with it, but just to disclose how we are required to sort the waiting list. This is all printed out here for you in the information packet. Yep, question here. When will we receive the email with the lottery application number? So if you apply for the lottery and you're approved, you will get the email once your application has been reviewed by SEB. So if you submit the online application sometime this week, you should expect to get that a response, either with a denial or with the lottery application number and a response email by probably next week or the week after. So within 2 weeks. Of course, if it's the end of the application period, you wouldn't have to wait 2 weeks to get that. So it just depends kind of on when we're checking the database, which we are doing every few days, I believe. So that same email that I'm talking about with your lottery application number, it's also going to confirm the bedroom sizes that you applied for, and it's going to confirm whether or not you requested a accessible apartment, so mobility or hearing impairment accessible apartment. So when you're looking at that email, really make sure that everything looks accurate to what you applied for, because with online applications, or really with any application, there could have been a typo or you forgot to fill out something. So just make sure that everything looks right, so we don't have your household on the wrong waiting list, for example, which you don't want that to happen. So on your application, like I mentioned, you will have indicated your household type. So in some cases, smaller households can apply for larger units, but in general, larger households are going to have priority over smaller households. And like I said, the information packet has a lot more on household types. But to give you an example, a type 1 household, so maybe it's a type 1 household that has 2 adults who share a bedroom, that household could apply for a 2-bedroom unit because there are 2 people. But all of the type 2 and type 3 households are going to have priority over that type 1 household on the waiting list because they're applying for a 2-bedroom. And then again, keep in mind that for this lottery specifically, type 1 household, or sorry, 1-person households can't live in 2-bedroom units, and 2-person households can't live in 3-bedroom units unless they have that reasonable accommodation for an extra bedroom, like I mentioned. So the lottery itself is going to be held on September 16th at 6 p.m. So it's going to be held very much in the same way of this information session because it's going to be a Zoom call, and there's going to be a screen share where you can see the lottery taking place, which will be done digitally. So it will be a randomization of the lottery application numbers on the screen. And every lottery application number is going to be included in the lottery, and it will have a position, and it will be drawn. So sometimes you think of lotteries, you think, okay, there's 65 apartments, there's only going to be 65 numbers drawn, but that isn't the case here. The purpose of this lottery will be to establish an order of the waiting list. So in general, it's more beneficial if your number is called early in the lottery, but it may not be the deciding factor of whether or not you are moving forward in the process to lease one of the units, because we still need to sort the results from the lottery and put everybody's lottery application number on the waiting list. So for example, maybe a qualified type 1 household, like that 2-person couple that I mentioned, is drawn first in the lottery. They have the absolute number 1, absolute first number drawn, but they've only applied for a 2-bedroom unit. They're still going to be quite a ways down that 2-bedroom waiting list because all of the type 3 and 2 households are going to be ahead of them. So if you're further down on the waiting list, or if you were drawn later in the lottery, it doesn't mean that you will not be able to rent one of the apartments. So just keep that in mind. There's going to be different reasons that people might drop off the waiting list, or may not qualify later on, or decide to not take an apartment. So it really depends on a lot of things. And so during the lottery itself, you're not going to know exactly where you fall on the waiting list because, like I said, I still have to sort the results based off of your household size, whether or not your local preference in some cases for some waiting lists, and whether or not your household needs an accessible unit. So the good news is that we send the waiting list, the sorted waiting list, to everyone later on the same evening as the lottery. So there won't be too much of a wait. You'll see where you stand and whether or not the leasing office will be inviting you forward to move on to the lease screening portion of the application process. So when you get this email with the waiting list, you're going to find your lottery application number, and you'll be able to see where you are. Top households from each waiting list are going to be contacted by the leasing office so that you can then do the next steps in the process with them. So you're going to be completing your lease screening, your program eligibility screening, and like I said, that lease screening with the management team usually includes a check of your credit, rental history check, background check to determine if you're eligible to rent with them. And then your program eligibility screening will include the leasing office collecting and reviewing your income, asset, and tax documentation in order to confirm that the information listed on your lease application was accurate and that you are still eligible for the affordable housing program. So the leasing office will be following the order on the waiting list. So if you have the top position on, say, the 2-bedroom waiting list, for example, you'll have the first chance or first choice in reserving one of the 2-bedroom apartments. And that's true even if someone further down the waiting list happens to complete their lease or program screenings before you do, because if you're number one on that 2-bedroom waiting list, you're going to have top choice if you're approved for the program. And then once you've leased a unit or reserved a unit, the second person on the waiting list gets to look at the apartments, and it goes so on down the list until everything is leased. And then once you're leased, you're done with income screenings until your lease renewal date. So if you are renting an affordable apartment, say you sign a lease for October, around this time, or probably a little earlier, sometime during June or July, you're going to be asked to recertify your income with the leasing office. That's standard for every person that's renting an affordable apartment. So you want to have, access to income assets, that sort of thing, to be able to submit for your annual recertification. If your income has increased and now is above that 80% of area median income at your lease renewal, that's fine. Households remain eligible for the affordable price, the affordable rent, and can remain in the apartment for as long as your household doesn't exceed 140% of the current year's area median income. So, for example, a household of 2 would qualify for one of these apartments, one of the affordable apartments with an income at or below $85,450. That same family can make up to $119,630 at the time of the recertification next year in order to remain eligible to pay that affordable price in the apartment. So there's some wiggle room there. I think for, the program is keeping in mind that obviously if someone gets a raise or gets another job that's higher paying, it shouldn't necessarily mean that you now need to pay market rent to be able to stay in your home. So, so that's the reason for that. That really covers what I wanted to get through in the call tonight. Was there any questions that I didn't answer or anything that you wanted to ask? And again, if you're watching this after the fact, please reach out to SEB at the contact information on your screen here. So we look forward to getting your application. Again, the deadline to apply for Hawkley Apartments is September 9th at 2 p.m. So the online application link is here. This is also on our website. There's a QR code on the website if that's easier for you to apply, on your phone or anything. And if you think of any questions after the fact too, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to answer anything. Yep, so a question here, can I edit the application to include a studio? Yes, if you already applied for this lottery and you now want to also, edit anything on your application, you can do that. Just email us at info@sebhousing.com and just give us your information that you want to change, and we will do that for you. Yep, you can add a unit size if you want to. Yep. All right, so we look forward to getting your application, and any changes that you want to make to it before that application deadline, please email us, and we look forward to working with you. Have a good night. Thanks for tuning in. Bye now. Oh, question here. You can be approved. Yes, there's one more question. So can you be approved by SEB but denied by the management? Yes. So to get into the lottery, we're just doing that high level, preliminary review of what you're self-reporting on your lottery application. But if you, so you might get into the lottery, and then the leasing office is actually, in this case, is going to do both the lease screening and the program screening. So if you don't qualify to lease with them because of, bad credit or whatever it might be, then they could deny you after you had already been approved for the lottery. So yeah, that was the other question in here. So yes, there's still a few steps in the process, even if you get into the lottery, that you would need to go through, because you've still got that lease office screening and the program screening where you have to submit your pay stubs and all of that. All right. Like I said, any other questions that come up after tonight, please let us know, info@scbhousing.com, and we'll be in touch. Have a good night, everyone.